Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Eric Chemi. Politely Pushy. I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Welcome to Politely Pushy, folks. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Today, we're talking about conference season. It's early in the calendar year. It's that time of year again as we approach spring, where all the big technology conferences are about to happen, are happening. If you're thinking about them, you're probably too late at this point. If you're trying to get ready, you should be ready to go in terms of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. So to talk about that, I've got two of my favorite Spartans here on the program, Emily and Caroline. Thank you both for joining me here today.
Thank you, Eric. I'm sure you say that about all of your Spartan guests.
I actually don't. I think this is the first time I said that. But now they're going to go back and say, well, he didn't say we were the favorite. So I feel like I've known you two very long, I think, in terms of being here. So let's talk. What are you two doing right now? I'm sure you're busy with clients getting ready for the big conferences, right? And are there any particular ones that you are excited to go to? Is there a particular type of client that you're excited? I won't call on any one of you, so whoever's most excited can jump in to answer.
Go for it, Caroline.
Nobody wants to answer the question.
I can jump in here. So NVIDIA GTC in San Jose every year is always a big one for our deep tech enterprise AI clients. And I've attended in person and also supported it virtually for clients in terms of staffing briefings, supporting their panels, getting eyes to the booth. And I would say, each year it grows bigger. The last time I attended in person, it was kind of a Taylor Swift era of Jensen presenting to a Superdome of his keynote panel, and photos were being taken everywhere, and everyone's onto his last word. There were special effects. I think there might have been smoke and mirrors at one point, and I think it's compartmentalizing that, getting them ready to stand out in an ever increasingly growing conference and a room full of other companies and clients who also do something with AI and also have partnerships with NVIDIA. So I think, prepping them for what we can share that's creative, innovative, and get the attention of the top tier media that are there and also have very packed schedules.
I'm also excited because RealSense, who I'm going to talk about, and the work we did at CES, they will be at South by Southwest this year. So we're deep in planning, executing against our strategy, and really thinking about how, tech solution provider can stand out at this more, consumer forward, not necessarily super techy type of conference, and what that looks like.
How do you deal with that? Because South by is just such a weird one, right? Where it's music, but it's tech, but it's current events and politics, and it's celebrities, and all these tech startups want to be part of it. That one feels to me like you can make a lot of mistakes as a brand for understanding, why are you here? What are you trying to accomplish? How do you measure success? And do you walk out of the week thinking, I did connect with the right tech journalist, or, we just spent a lot of money and had a good time?
Yeah, those are great questions and things that we've considered when putting together the strategy. I think, we had a successful strategy for CES, and what we're doing with South by Southwest is really thinking more about that everyday kind of consumer and the attendees of South by Southwest, because we know the people that went to CES, they're looking for the cool tech, right? They're looking for the humanoids, the robotics, those types of conversations. The people coming to South by Southwest may just be looking for a good concert. So how do we get...
Right, you're just in the way. Some tech startup is a total vibe killer, yeah.
Right, so it's like, how do we get people involved and interested in RealSense? Because they're moderating a panel, and of course we want reporters to come and cover them as well. But I think South by Southwest is a great example of, yes, we want media to cover RealSense and what they're doing at South by Southwest, but this is also a big chance for influencers, right? How are we connecting RealSense with influencers at South by Southwest to really bolster their appearance and make people care?
Yeah, I attended South by last year as a consumer, not for a specific client. And obviously it's almost the polar opposite of GTC and going from, Santa Clara to Austin, Texas for the first time with one of my colleagues here, Jess. And, it struck me that was very different than any other conference I've been to is if you don't have like an activation or, some kind of outside event that you're hosting, then it's not really going to fly and catch attention. I mean, there was very little brochures to be had compared to the average tech conference I've been to. And a lot of it was focused on like the after parties or connected to the music, movie premieres, culture, and intertwining kind of all of those elements within tech to get the attention of the reporters attending.
You went for fun? You just went...
We went for work, Eric. So we were here, on business and had some great conversations internally. Also, attended a few good concerts, ate some good Austin food in the meantime, but that's neither here nor there.
Did you actually get anywhere with that? I'm curious that you mentioned that. So you went there for a different purpose. Was the mentality there able to get people thinking about those things? Like, hey, let's talk about business, or was that an uphill battle?
It was more casual, I would say. So a lot of the prospects we were meeting with, they were hosting a happy hour or, something before or after the event and, wanted to sort of mingle there with their networking. I think a lot of, the legwork was also just done via LinkedIn in the weeks leading up to it before reaching out to ones that we aligned with and worked with similar companies, checking in on their plans. And we also made a very curated list between us of Austin places that would be great for prospecting, because I think that's another key element of it too. You clearly don't want to be in a dive bar, and sometimes a Michelin star restaurant is a little bit much for having that first conversation with someone you might want to work with. So we did our due diligence there and making sure we were finding spots that felt attainable, had a casual atmosphere, but also that we could get down to business and pull up the PowerPoint if needed, as much as everyone loves that.
So in either case, right, whether it's something that's deep tech or it's South by or everything in the middle, how do you try to tell clients like this is what success looks like? What does it measure? How do you measure? What does it look like? Are they usually telling you, here's what we want to get out of it? Or is it you're telling them the success? What's that conversation like before the conference?
I think usually when we discuss events with clients and, this is something that is planned out in advance just because of the budget. They're very expensive to attend conferences, let alone demo, especially at these larger conferences. So I think once the budget is set that they're going to exhibit, most clients, first and foremost, are there to get customers, right? That is where their hat is. And then they tell us, hey, we're doing this, see what you can get. But it's really our jobs to explain how we can really get that ROI on the spend at the conference, because PR and social and all of our integrated approaches all ladder back up to that customer acquisition anyways. But I think a lot of clients are really stuck at, this is an opportunity for us to be face-to-face with a potential customer, give them a demo and get that lead. They're not really in the mindset until they talk to us about, how can I leverage this for social? How am I leveraging this to get a feature in the publication that we're really targeting? And it's our jobs to educate them and tell them the strategy as to how we do that.
Right. Because there is a little bit of a energy pie, right? Or time share pie. Like, okay, is my executive going to spend time trying to hit up possible customers? Or are you going to drag them around to meet with media? And if their time is limited, I can see them thinking, well, if I only talk to media, if you got me 50 meetings with journalists, that might not be what I want, because actually then I have no time to talk to prospects there. Like, I can see that push and pull.
Yep. And I think it's always the case that we would recommend multiple people, if you have a booth and if the budget is there, being there and letting the product people be at your booth and reserving that C-suite for the thought leadership, for the interviews, if possible, if that's within budget. Like I said earlier, we know that these conferences keep growing in cost. But I think that would be our recommendation as to how to play that. And then, of course, the CEO take certain meetings with prospects as they come up, but really focus on those media interviews.
And to ladder on to Emily's point, you had asked, about KPIs and setting client expectations. I think something that also happens a lot is clients timing big products or launch announcements around these major conferences, which is a great idea. I think the thing we're often going back and forth with is getting enough lead time before that conference to adequately pitch reporters and media under embargo, because there's a strong chance that at many of these big tech events, there's a lot of companies announcing new products or offerings. So those, 2 to 3 weeks before the event, I would say at a minimum are really crucial in terms of, one, setting up some of those virtual briefings, getting the tech specs, anything that the journalist needs. Because I think sometimes there can be this expectation of, day of feature coverage on the first day of CES, for example. And, that doesn't come to be by chance. It's often weeks of preparation and back and forth with reporters to, one, get them to the booth, but also get them what they need that ultimately lands that kind of feature story.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, a lot of companies may not realize that when you see that day one big story, none of the work happened that day. That's been ready to go for weeks, right? This was just timed to click publish on day one, but the work was done. The interviews were done. Everything was done way in advance. And I can see why maybe someone who's less experienced in that game might think, hey, where's my big coverage? We got here yesterday. Where's my coverage?
I also want to add that we had interesting situations with my clients, RealSense, and then our cybersecurity client, Exceed, where neither client had a product announcement, but still wanted coverage at these conferences. So we deployed a thought leadership strategy. For RealSense, which I've talked quite a bit about, this was a thought leadership strategy where we offered the CEO to discuss, the future of humanoids and robotics. Luckily, the CEO was at the show. They did not have a booth, but we offered reporters to meet with Nadav, the CEO of RealSense, at one of the humanoid customer booths to give them that visual compelling reason. And we were able to secure a Bloomberg interview by doing that, just based off of thought leadership. They did not announce a product at CES. And Exceed is really interesting and compelling because we also recommended that we do outreach around CES. Now, Exceed did not attend CES, nor did they exhibit at CES. And we still landed.
You wouldn't have seen them at all. If you walked into the halls, you don't see their name anywhere.
You don't see their name.
Okay.
However, the CEO is based in Las Vegas.
Okay.
So we were able to do thought leadership outreach about the future of cybersecurity. And namely, I think what was similar in both strategies is that we went to reporters, not just saying, hey, come meet with a CEO, they have thoughts. It was, this is what's happening within CES. But let me talk to this CEO at this company about what that means outside of CES, outside of the trade show. Let's broaden the scope because we all know what's happening within CES. You're already covering it. And I'm going to let you talk to the CEO who can explain what that means after the conference.
And that worked.
It is. Yes.
Why do you think that worked?
I think because a lot of people are taking the other approach of product announcements, what's happening at CES, and not coming from that bird's eye lens of what does this actually mean once we leave the conference and the lights go down.
How do you get anyone to stand out, right? When there's hundreds of companies presenting, all these logos, all these names, all these product announcements, and journalists are completely overwhelmed. And I know when I was a reporter, my goal was to find, and a lot of times it was find the biggest companies that I could get access to, right? Whereas the little companies are trying to find me, and everyone is always like trying to go to the person that doesn't want to talk to them, right? So I'm going to the giants, but the giants don't want to talk to me because they're too big for that, right? They're like, we don't, you're just getting in the way. The little companies want to talk to me, but I don't want to talk to them because they're getting in my way. And so how does how do you play that game where there's endless, I mean, there's so many big company logos that are household names that even they're not going to get that much attention, right? So what's the playbook, right? For especially our companies are typically these up and comers or startups. They're the Davids against Goliaths, right? We're taking on giant tech in a lot of cases. So it's so overwhelming, right? And let's say the reporter's there for 3 days, right? How many stories can he possibly do in 3 days? He can't write that many, you know? So how do you even begin that conversation? How do you decide this is the angle that I'm going to mention? This is the way I'm going to present this company so that it's not just one of 50 pitches they're hearing?
I think especially when it's something like CES, the big major companies, I would say I see a lot of reporters, making their way to the booth that first day, but day 2, day 3, even day 4, that's really prime time for startups and some of the ones we've been supporting. And a lot of these reporters are looking for covering the most emerging, the most innovative, the most interesting, sometimes even the most wacky tech that came out of CES. So we really saw an opportunity. I think another thing that can be great is when this is possible, planning to be around or near big name booths and kind of the overflow that can then be corralled to your booth as well. We, by chance, had CES come and they were filming a little bit by our client's booth displays, and we were chatting with them. And Justine, who's been one of my favorite YouTube reviewers, who's had a channel for over 20 years, ended up coming by and doing a segment with CES hosts at the panel, filming it, putting it on the social channels for CES Network. And it was funny because the girl at the booth across from us came over the next day and she said, "How much did you guys pay for that?" And we said, "Nothing. We just started talking to them." So I think people really do underestimate like the human element of it all, and just being able to be personal, not talk to someone like a sales shtick, and like really knowing your elevator pitch without making it sound like an elevator pitch.
That's good. I like that story. Emily, I thought you might be going to answer something, so I was going to let you jump in.
You thought I was going to answer
something?
Yeah,
I didn't want to cut you off. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I haven't been to a trade show in a couple of years, so I think that's really a great story of what it's like. I haven't been lucky enough to go to CES yet, but I've been to a couple HR tech conferences and completely agree that the human element really wins. I believe I wrote, actually, after it was HR tech, a blog about how, one of my tips to stand out at a conference is to have a prop. Because I was walking, and this wasn't intentional, this was just something I discovered, was at a booth, I won this life-size teddy bear. Okay.
You won it.
I won it just by going to a booth and like spinning their wheel, right? I won it. And, I have a young son. So I'm like, I need to bring this back for him. So I was toting it around. The amount of people that stopped me to talk about this teddy bear in my arms was more than anything I could have done on my own fruition. It just naturally generated something for people to talk to me about. And I would definitely say is just like a very like piece of low hanging fruit is like, you need to stand out, whether that's through what you're wearing. If it's a prop, I'm not saying go get a life-size teddy bear, but that was a very easy way for people and myself to start up conversations on the floor of that conference hall.
I thought the lesson was you should get a life-size teddy bear. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
You should. I will tell you, my son does not play with it. It was not worth the baggage fees, but I still have it. Yeah.
Like, I dragged this thing and brought it back. But should you actually bring that teddy bear with you or give it to Caroline or whoever's going to the next conference? Should someone just walk around with that all day?
Yeah. I mean, the logistics of that, these conferences are so big and everything, but I was shocked. It's just like, there's so many people, and it's what we teach in PR and what we're talking about today is like, how do you stand out? And I think outside of the strategy, there's some low hanging fruit, like, and I'm not saying it's all low hanging, but like what Caroline said, location, being adjacent to, having something stand out about you on your person or at your booth. That invites conversation at these conferences.
How do you do it in a way that's not just so, shticky, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, they've got all of the basic stuff we see that are attention seeking for the fake purposes of being attention seeking. How do you advise someone to say, let's do something that is meaningful, that's going to get you the right kind of people into your booth and not random people that are going to waste your time, right? Because then that becomes a detriment. Because I'm sure you've heard a lot of bad ideas from customers or from clients, like, hey, we're thinking about doing X in our booth, right? I'm sure there's some bad ideas. You think, maybe there's a better way to do this.
I would say definitely making it organic to the client. And I would say we see a lot of, I would say, especially like newer companies, they want to invest, their yearly advertising budget onto something big and splashy at CES. And what I would say, and this is true though, is that investing in the product, this is a one-time thing. You may get some, clicks and mentions, on the CNETs or some of these viral headlines, but what ultimately people want to see, especially if they can, is putting their hands on the tech, being able to demo it, being able to feel it, being able to see the features. I mean, having people that are there, whether it's the CEO or an engineer that can really nerd out and dive into why this tech is new and different and better than anything they've ever seen, are especially crucial here. And I would say too is, we consider seeing more and more of just purely paid advertorial media opportunities when pitching for conferences. So I would say like the earned windows are getting smaller. So finding, that sweet spot of letting them be hands-on with the tech and, testing it out for themselves is really more critical than ever.
What about, go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say, and, we have a great social team, and, Skylar is part of the social team for Real Sense and Exceed, actually. And I think part of getting people to your booth at your conference comes back to social media. I see so many posts on LinkedIn of people that are just saying, I'm going to be at CES booth number 708, stop by.
Nobody's stopping by.
Not stopping by. Yeah. I'm not stopping by. Okay. Now, what would get me to stop by if there's something visually compelling and interesting, or a reason for me to want to engage and actually stop by that booth, right? If I see it on social media, if it's targeted to me on social media, maybe through a paid campaign, but, simply just saying stop by, I see stop by this booth number from every person on LinkedIn about a conference. It needs to be more than that. We have to move past that and actually give me a visual, a video, something compelling as to what I should go in person to see and experience, or some sort of engagement tactic, as to why I need to actually make time in my day to stop by your booth, because it's not cutting it right now.
Let me write down your 5-digit booth number and go look for that in the directory. It's funny you mentioned social, because that was going to be my next question, is what should companies be doing, let's say, during the conference on social? But part of it is before, part of it's during, and part of it is after. What should their messaging be to maximize the fact that they were there? Or like your Las Vegas company that wasn't even there, but they're kind of around it, they're on the periphery. All of this has to happen, because if you just show up and you're not getting some public visibility from that, then you're wasting the opportunity.
Yeah. I don't know, Caroline, if you have any thoughts, but I think there needs to be a large strategy leading up, being at the conference, and then post-conference. And what we know about social media, no matter the platform, is that the human experience is what gets the most engagement and clicks.
As opposed to like a product video or something like that.
Right. I hear from our social team all the time that, the engagement rates skyrocket when it's, an employee profile or a customer profile, something that involves a human. So I think, outside of the visually compelling aspects of the booth or the product, having that human experience attached to the social media. I'm not the social media expert, but that's what I think would really set you apart in conference season, especially if you're commenting on other tech or stories that you're seeing, not being so self-promotional, because everyone at the conference is trying to be self-promotional.
Right. Right. Maybe it's like, here's what you missed today, or here's what I found interesting today, or here's someone who stopped by our booth, or here, let me go to another booth and talk about that. Like, I can see how human activity during the conference could add a lot of value, or like just 3 things we found interesting today, or post something like that. Yeah,
exactly. Something that doesn't seem as self-serving by nature, and really shows that, like, hey, I learned some things. I'm a person too. I attended this conference, and I learned a few things today that I didn't previously know that I want to share here today.
Right. Or I missed, like, we can only go to some small subset of the conference. So maybe they're posting something that I didn't get to, but at least I'm going to their company's social media pages to find that information. So like, I could see some value in that approach that you're talking about.
Yeah. And just really having that thought leadership, I think, is what it comes back to throughout all of the social media strategy, is really honing in on that messaging and making it applicable to, the conference and the season. But go ahead, Caroline.
I was just thinking, social media can be a really great tool. I would say, especially with conference hashtags, I, often use it even in just general pitching to get a sense of, what reporters are working on, what topics they're excited about, any source requests. And so we found, a lot of attending media that way and gotten intel on specifically what they're looking for and assigned a pitch this year. And that's been tremendously helpful. But on the client side of things, we saw Displace. They did a lot of behind the scenes background of like building the products and posting those short little video clips on LinkedIn and on Twitter to give people a peek of what they were working on. And to Emily's point of not feeling like a sales stick, it also does give you the human element that people are looking for, of the people behind the tech. It's a small startup that's scaling. It's not a no name that's manufactured off seas, and you never really see the behind the scenes of the product. So I think that really made them stand out. And some of the video they actually posted on social were then used by reporters in some of their coverage. So I would say that's an example of using social well in the weeks leading up to and during the event.
Yeah. What final takeaways do you have in terms of a mistake to avoid? Maybe they're personal mistakes of, I didn't pack the right thing, or I wasn't ready for this kind of event, or for some company who's on a first time, like we're a new company, let's say, or we're new to the conference circuit, because let's say we're like 2 or 3 years old of a startup, for example, and we haven't done this. What are some real basic takeaways to remember and basic mistakes to avoid?
I would say just in general, wear comfortable shoes for the ladies. It is not a heeled event. Your feet will be killing you by the end of the day, no matter what you're wearing. So treat your feet nicely. I would say the biggest mistake, and this is coming more from a PR perspective, but I think it can be insightful for clients as well, is that a conference is, we work remotely. So a conference is really a human event. And that means from a PR perspective that, like, we're on the ground. This is no longer I'm emailing the reporter. This is like, we are tracking them down on foot to try to find them in real time to bring them to your booth. And so we need our clients and partners to be just as agile as we are. So that may mean following us to, this coffee shop on a moment's notice because, hey, something came up with the reporter. They got a chance to talk to NVIDIA. They need to meet now. Let's go. We got to run. Just being ready for almost anything and in person on the ground, running at any moment, because you have to catch these reporters in person. It's no longer emailing and calling and texting.
Literally running and grabbing their arm and dragging them with you.
It is. It's a physical sport, and let's train like it. Be prepared. Yeah.
I'd agree with Emily. I was the only one at CES that thought to bring shoe inserts, and I have to say it was a real game changer in terms of being on my feet.
My rivals are collapsing on the ground while I keep powering through with these shoe
inserts. That's how she got the media. She was able to outpace them all.
Yeah, I mean, it's like running, a track meet, Eric. I was going back to high school to corral that reporter by the broadcast booth to make it over. I'm half joking there. But I would say in terms of, things for clients to know, big takeaways are that, the Wall Street Journals, the Bloombergs are, of course, the big shiny things, nod to your background there as well, Eric, but also don't discount the trade relationships you can build there, the trade coverage, because when it comes to where your competitors are being featured, where your stakeholders are reading and getting those thorough, detailed product reviews that dives into all of the specs that, compares it to products on the market, those are incredibly critical. And it's often those pieces that lead up to getting that slam dunk Wall Street Journal feature, even though it might seem like it just goes from point A to point Z immediately. So I always try to encourage, my clients to make that time for some of their friendlies, the people that have been, following or covering them for years, because it really is a trickle down effect with media. And, it's a lot of layoffs kind of across the editorial landscape, I would say, now more than ever, really foster those relationships as much as you can.
I agree, but the trade media is much more dialed into your kind of tech. They're much more dialed into your industry, your sector. They're going to write a much more accurate and thorough article. And then people like me floating around at top tier media are like, I could talk about this. I could talk about something else completely different. And our definition of an industry is much broader than what a trade journalist would do. So yeah, you definitely want to get that clearly written, accurate coverage from a trade journalist and then kind of graduate yourselves up to, okay, if they understand you in the trade pubs and they can accurately define you and they can give you a lot of press, then you can work your way up to big. Like, hey, we've won our, it's sort of like a playoffs. Like we won our conference. Now we're ready for the big national tournament here. So I think you're right. You can't just try to get the big guys because there's too many things at a conference that they could be looking at. Whereas where your specific subsector journalist will, I think spend more time. Spend more time and want to take that meeting, want to play with your product, want to sit down. Maybe for them, it's like, okay, if your CEO's not around it right now, I'll talk to the product person here. I'll talk to someone else here. Whereas maybe someone like me would have been like, I'm only talking to the CEO, right? Like I'm not talking to anybody else. So I do think you're right. You can't ignore all of those levels.
And I just wanted to add, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Emily goes first.
Okay. I was just going to say, speaking of those trade friendlies, we actually had a case with SHL, an HR tech client. And this doesn't necessarily relate to a conference, but we had a friendly who wrote about them frequently and was a reporter for an HR trade. Well, given the media landscape and all of the layoffs and shifts, she moved to Financial Times. She is still tapping us for SHL because she knows exactly what they do, their thought leadership, etc. So you never know where these industry folks are going to land. Because she landed in Financial Times and now we have Financial Times consistently knocking on our door because she covered us so much in trades.
Yeah, you never know. There's so much movement. I think about all the people just from the Bloomberg and CNBC newsroom that have gone off to all other kinds of newsrooms, right? They've either come from different kinds or gone to different kinds. There's such a diaspora, is that the word, right? They move around and go to different places, just like your example. But Caroline, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, a trade reporter will be the first to call you out on your bullshit. And I actually think that's a really healthy thing, right? Because they are so deeply ingrained in the industry. If you're not the first to launch this specific feature, if your competitor has announced something similar last week, they're going to tell you that. And I think that can be really healthy conversations. And I've seen it happen in real time with executives where they've actually improved products or tailored messaging based on the conversations they've been having with trade reporters. And I think, it keeps us honest, it keeps us accountable, and keeps us on our toes as PR pros to really understand, the tech behind what we're pitching and being able to portray it, in a creative, interesting way, but also accurately to, the industries we're reaching.
Well, it's going to be a busy year for you two. Good luck with all of this. Thanks for the time today.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.